disciplines and how spiritual disciplines can make your life work. And I had a passion. I had a passion for kind of the inquiry, that happens. The primary modality was going to meetings, and at the meetings, people were just deconstructing life and kind of, unraveling cause and effect. Like, if I do this, what happens? And, what's a skillful behavior? What's an unskillful behavior? How do you navigate this endlessly, unfolding, challenging, confusing thing called life? And people would just be talking about it. Every night I go to a meeting and we'd talk about life and like, what choices were we making to respond effectively to life? And so that was the Army. I spent my first 6 months of sobriety going to meetings in the Army. And then I went back to the United States and I dove immediately into my 12-step program in the United States. And about 2 years into it, I was going to meetings in Cambridge where Jack Kornfield had come back from Thailand and gone to Harvard. So there was a legacy of his meditation community. And so all the people in the 12-step program that I was a part of kind of were, hip to this whole idea of Buddhist meditation, and that it's the 11th step that you saw through prayer and meditation. People were very specific about how they thought I should meditate.
Right.
And then about 2 hours west of Boston was, and is to this day, the largest yoga facility in the United States. And so through the work of Jack Kornfield and through the work of the Kabbalah Yoga Institute, I had these resources within my 12-step community. I'm going to meetings every day and people talking about going to Kabbalah for the week of doing like yoga and resting. That sounded great. And people were talking. We had a meditation community right in Cambridge, and then Barry, Mass is a retreat center about a half hour away. And so by just a series of, just good fortune early in my, so I'm looking at life through the lens of a spiritual practitioner. My primary practice is the 12-step program, but they were very pragmatic. They were just about figuring out what disciplines make your life work. And they had a set that were working for me. Like one of them, for example, is if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. And that worked out great. That was really true, And then another one was just asking for help, And so I had, by 2 or 3 years into it, I had a pretty big support network of people who I saw on a pretty much daily basis, who are my friends and my mentors and my colleagues on this spiritual path. And I just had such an enthusiasm for it that I wanted the best for myself. There's a way that when a spiritual community is really working, you have a lot of joy in just being a part of the community itself, but that's also instilling in you a passion for your own well-being. And so although I was happy to be a part of what was going on in the meetings, I was also aware that I was responsible for my well-being. And for me, there was a tremendous amount of dis-ease related to post-traumatic stress. And so I needed to deal with that. It was affecting my thinking. It was affecting my physical health. It was affecting what I could and couldn't tolerate. Like I was at a point in my life at 2 years sober where if I got a parking ticket, it was like, it broke me. I was like, my reaction to a parking ticket was like, I don't know that I can deal with this. And so I couldn't really have that much of a job. I was just like waiting tables and delivering packages. I couldn't do much professionally. I couldn't really be in a relationship. My friends had to kind of just put up with me. And so I needed to do more than what I was doing. And that more started off as meditation. At about 18 months sober, I started meditating, and that made a huge impact. And so because of the effect meditation was having on me, I was open to doing yoga poses. I was like, oh, this is like meditation, but like physical. And I'd always been physical. So I was just like, that's going to work. And sure enough, I went to Kripalu and did I had like a week's vacation. I spent it at Kripalu that spring, and I've never looked back. I mean, I think that I did yoga every day for those 6 days. This is back in the day, so there was no yoga in Boston. I just brought home VHS yoga videos, and I would say that for the next 10 years from there, I did yoga, maybe 15 years. I did yoga pretty much every day. There's very few days that I would, in those 10, 15 years that I didn't do yoga. Within a few years, I became a yoga teacher, and I was just really off to the races because I found something that addressed the effects of post-traumatic. I was put in a orphanage when I was 10 days old. And at like 2 years old, I was adopted into a family that was, very violent. It was not just my parents, but the entire family system was a lot of yelling and hitting within the entire family tree. It was a very, and I would say that was true for Boston in general. Boston was a place of yelling and hitting. And so I went from an orphanage into, a place that was significantly, I don't have any scary memories from the orphanage, but my entire childhood was just alarming. And so, I was like alarmed for like, I got to tell you, at 18, I went into the Army, and things were like a lot calmer in the Army than they were in like my neighborhood or my family. Like the Army was like a cakewalk compared to, my childhood. And so, it was just a calmer, safer place to be in the infantry in the U.S. Army than my middle school. And so I just was a mess. I had never had any real like calmness in my life or safety in my life. And what yoga was doing for me and what meditation was doing for me was really for the first, like no one took an interest in like, wow, you're jacked up. Why don't you take a few slow breaths? Like that was never told to me, like at all. And so, when I started meditating, I'd sit in this chair and I'd turn on a clock. I'd timer for 20 minutes and I'd count breaths. And probably for the first time in my life, I was taking full breaths. I'd take a slow breath in and then a slow breath out. And what I've learned in the 30 years since then is that, just taking a belly breath will release your psoas, and you release your psoas. And like if you're a trauma victim like I was, your psoas is tight, and you're in this like getting ready to run or fight physiology. And you take a belly breath, it relaxes the psoas and it relaxes your entire physiology.
Yeah.
So if you're not taking like slow, deep breaths throughout the day and you have a trauma history, you're in like hypervigilance all day. Like you're going to bed in hypervigilance and waking up in hypervigilance. And so the meditation was where I took my first, probably I was 27, 20 years old before I took a slow breath in and a slow breath out. And then in yoga poses, they taught you to become aware of where you were holding tension and like breathe into the tension and to release the attention and to bring your attention into the present moment. And so with the breathing, I changed my physiology, and that gave me, and then with the yoga poses, I was able to release whatever I was holding on to. And then eventually I learned to bring my attention to the present moment, and out of that scary mind of mine, my mind had been conditioned by, a good 2.5 decades of trauma. And so they say that your thinking is 90% repetitive and 80% negative. And right. So you grow someone up in like a war zone, and then you give them those stats, and what are they thinking about all day? The worst memories from their traumatized childhood. And so coming into the present moment was a huge relief for me. And knowing that the present moment was really the only place that matters, that these things I was thinking of are like irrelevant. Like if you want the truth of who you are, you want the truth of where you are, you want the truth of what you're capable of and how to respond effectively and use that capacity, you got to be present. And they made that case day after day, year after year, until I bought in. And so, the meditation, the yoga taught me how to like self-regulate. I think that was a term I was given recently, that I asked someone like, what's the role of mindfulness in social justice? And the answer was like, social justice is conflict. And if you teach people mindfulness, they can self-regulate as they go through the kind of the hardships of conflict, of opposing, of being able to be present for an opposing viewpoint without, and self-regulate so that you can respond as opposed to react. And so my yoga teachers and meditation teachers taught me to self-regulate. And before long, I was teaching others to self-regulate, and that helped me to prioritize my own well-being. And so it really, yoga and meditation were kind of my aftercare. I think, the initial treatment for my addiction was 12-step meetings. And once I had established, kind of a stable sobriety, I needed treatment for the trauma that I had been self-medicating with my addiction. So that's what brought me up to being a yoga teacher.
It's been a pretty wild ride since then, it sounds like.
Well, yeah. I went to Kabbalah in the summer of 1997 to do a 30-day training to be a teacher. And no one cared about yoga in the summer. Maybe in LA there was a yoga scene, but the United States was blissfully unaware of what was going to happen, around yoga. And so when I went to go to my training, I didn't expect that you would be able to teach yoga in any meaningful way. It was extremely esoteric. Mm-hmm. I would say more esoteric. There was like less yoga in my world than there is Tai Chi in most people's world. It was an extremely esoteric thing. And so me and the 50 people I went to training with we were people who loved yoga and wanted to spend our summer, most of them were like high school teachers and stuff and educators. And I was a social worker in between gigs. And so we were all just like helpers, do-gooders who were having a summer vacation. And none of us thought that we'd be able to really do much with that training. And within 2 years, I was working full-time as a yoga teacher, and I had never stopped. So that was 97. I got a book deal for Meditations from the Mat in, I think it was January of 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was been teaching for basically, 98, 99, 2000. And the fall of 2000, one of my students came to me and said, "You ought to write a book." And I said, "Sure." And she walked me through the process. Katrina Kennison walked me through the process of how to sell a book and, take a sabbatical and write a book. It was like we went from 1 million people doing yoga to 11 million people doing yoga in 10 years. And then the next 10 years, it went up to 35 million.
Right.
The yoga scene changed like that. And the people that, for better or for worse, the people who were teaching yoga on day one just reaped that whirlwind, made careers, lost careers, touched tens of thousands of lives. Just amazing, just an amazing experience for my generation of yoga teachers to watch what happened between kind of 1999 and the window between 1999 and 2019. And now what's happening is just this whole second wave where everyone is taking yoga into schools and prisons and shelters and the military. And it's just an endless amount. I am presently the co-chair of Vets for Tim Ryan on Tim Ryan's presidential campaign. And I am there in the capacity, not really of a vet, but as a yoga teacher. Tim Ryan believes that mindfulness, yoga, and social emotional learning is the answer for his communities. He works in a district in Ohio, and he works with the school system and what have you, and he works with the Veterans Association, and so he's literally running a presidential campaign. A plank of his platform is mindfulness and yoga.
Nice.
Yeah, and so. So this is a whole nother wave of mainstreaming. You got to figure, I went to my training in 1997 and no one knew, I was part of a social work organization. I was doing residential treatment. So we had like 35 social workers working under one roof. And when I came back to Boston, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, home of MIT and Harvard. This is kind of a progressive locale. When I came back from my